Hi everyone, welcome to Couchbase Coding with Matthew Groves. This is supposed to be a 10-minute slice of my day as a developer advocate. Episodes are getting longer this week because I'm doing some cool stuff and I'm having a lot of fun. Live every day. Check out old episodes on YouTube up there. Email me or tweet me your comments, suggestions, questions. I'd love to hear from you. It occurred to me that I might want to add some music to that waiting room little screen there. So maybe next time I'll have some interesting music. See what I can find for that. All right, so today I wanted to talk to you about something I've been working on my blog, or just sort of show off this tool and get your thoughts on it. It's something I've never used before until very recently. It's called Apache NiFi, N-I-F-I. It's a data flow processing, sync, migration type of tool. I really am enjoying it. I don't know that much about it, but so far I really like it a lot, and I wish I'd learned about this tool much earlier in my career. But very cool. So I want to show you today what you can do with it. So what I've got here today is, you look at the screen, I've got just a list of Docker images running on my machine locally. So I've got up here at the top, I've got Microsoft SQL Server for Linux running in Docker. And I've got a database in there with one table, and I've got the same Couchbase instance I've been using all week, Couchbase 5.5 beta, also running. So let me just show you these things. So here's the Couchbase. I've got this bucket called tickets in it, and there's nothing in there right now, just 0 documents. And I've got SQL Server Management Studio here connected to the SQL Server for Linux, localhost 1433, and I've got this ticket check table here. It has nothing in it right now either, but I've got a schema defined with a name, section, row, seat, and then like a timestamp representing when they're actually scanning their ticket as they go into a ballpark. So in case you haven't guessed by now, this is also related to some stuff I'm doing with the Cincinnati Reds, working with their data team, and they're trying to do some sort of visualization stuff, and they want to move data from well, not move, but take a snapshot or a copy of data in real time from SQL Server over to a Couchbase instance where they can do some visualization stuff, which I'll probably be blogging about in the future as well. But right now we're just focusing on moving data from one place to another. Okay, so we've got those set up. So there's a number of ways to go about doing this, but the Reds have something they call, well, they use this NiFi tool for a lot of stuff already, so they thought they could just, reuse, have another NiFi data stream, data flow going from one to the other. And I'd never heard of NiFi before, so they're having some trouble getting it to connect to Couchbase, so I thought I'd jump in and learn something about it. Fortunately, 2 things. One, there's a NiFi image on Docker, which makes it easy for me to get up and running. 2, there's already a NiFi connector for Couchbase, so I don't have to create any sort of extra coding or any extra hoops to do that. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's get NiFi going here. So we're going to run a Docker image. We're going to call it NiFi, and NiFi's default port is 8080. It's a web-based UI. You'll see in a second here. So we got to expose a port so we can get to it from a browser, and it's just called Apache NiFi, and I'm going to use the latest image. So what did I do wrong here? Oh, this has to be NiFi. That's interesting. Huh? Does this have to be NiFi? Well, seems like I have. Okay. Well, that's something new about Docker I'm learning right now, so I need to make a change to my blog post. That's so no one copies and pastes that. All right, so anyway, there we go. If I do a list here, you can see I've got NiFi running, I've got SQL Server running, and I've got Couchbase all running in the same Docker host, which is convenient for me. So I can bring up NiFi here by going to localhost 8080/NiFi. And it might take a second to actually spin up because I just ran it, just created a brand new image in Docker there, so it might take a second to actually load. Did I get the ports right? 8080? Yeah, 8080. Anything else wrong here? It's just taking some time to spin up, I guess. Okay, there we go. So here's the NiFi UI. It's completely web-based here. It just looks like a piece of graph paper with some toolbars and stuff floating around. All right, so it's just completely blank. So I can I drag it around and zoom and stuff with this navigate here, but there's no point of reference. So what I want to do is first I'm going to tell NiFi about those databases. So I clicked on the icon there, go to controller services, and we'll start adding some database connections essentially. So there's a lot of different connections here that NiFi can do. You can see all the ones listed here. The one we're going to start with is SQL Server. So it is a DBCP connection pool. That's what that's called. So this will be like for JDBC type connections. So I just added that connection here, and this is a common pattern in NiFi. It'll start with this warning icon because you haven't actually configured it yet. So let's go in here and configure it. And the URL is something like, since this uses Java, we're going to be using JDBC driver and SQL Server 172. Oh, I need to get the actual IP address. So we'll do docker inspect to do that. And it's 172.17.03. 0.3. Okay, that's good. The driver class name. So I just know this from research. But click the wrong one. That it's this. It's com.microsoft.sqlserver.jdbc.sql server driver. All right. And the next thing is driver location. So this is a tricky part for me. But you basically put in this file path URL here to user share Java, and then the name of the jar file that the driver is in. Okay. Now the thing is that driver does not come out of the box, so we're going to have to go and actually download that. This is something I forgot about when I wiped out the image. I should have saved myself some time, but you can just go here and do a download and download this this tar file and etc. and go through that. I've already downloaded it earlier, but I do not have it currently in the Docker image. So let's go to my blog here, and it'll be in NiFi, and I think I have it in this. No, it's right here in the root here. So you can see they got 3 jar files. The JRE8 is the one that seemed to work for me. So I'm going to do a Docker copy. Remember how this works. Docker copy from this file here to NiFi, right? And then a container name, and then it's going to be user share Java. I think that's going to be right. Okay, so now that file is copied out there. There's other ways to do this, of course. It'd be nice if there was some way to just upload a file directly in NiFi UI. There might be, I don't know. I'm not that much of a NiFi expert yet. Okay, and then for database user. So I created a user earlier named Matt, although I can't remember the password now of that user. Again, I wiped out the NiFi here, but there's Matt. Let's see. I don't think I can actually see the password here, but I can generate a new one. So I'm going to use LastPass to generate a secure password. That's one thing that you need to be careful of when using SQL Server in Docker here, is you need to give it a really secure password. So I've just done that there. The password, I'll just paste it here for your reference. That's the secure password I'm using. It's got symbols, letters, numbers, etc. Okay. So that's the user. Here's the password. Paste it in there. Now NiFi is going to hide that from you once you enter it as a sensitive value, which is a good idea, I think. Okay, so there we go. Now we're connected. Well, we're not connected yet, but we have a connection that we can use to go to SQL Server. Okay, the next part will be to actually create one for Couchbase. And luckily, like I said, it's built right in already, Couchbase cluster service. So we'll click that, and we'll configure it. Its connection string is going to be Couchbase : / and then what's the IP? .02. Okay, and then here's a kind of a weird, tricky part with this connector is you actually have to add another field here and give it a name of bucket password 4, and then the name of the bucket, and then the bucket over here is tickets. So I actually have to say tickets in the property name. It's kind of a weird thing, but It works all right. And then enter the password. Now, this is also a weird thing. This NiFi connector is a little bit out of date. It's not configured to work with the new RBAC features in Couchbase 5. But fortunately, we have a backwards compatible way of doing that. So I'm going to enter a password here. Even though we don't have bucket passwords anymore, I'm going to enter that as the password. And back over here in security, I've created a user already with the name of tickets. And that user tickets has the password of password. So since the username is the same name as the bucket, this will work with older connectors and utilities that aren't quite up to date with Couchbase 5 yet. All right. So any aspiring Java developers out there, if you wanted to take a crack at this, updating the NiFi connector to work with RBAC. But in the meantime, you have to do with that backwards compatibility there. Okay, so I've got two connectors. All right, now the fun part. We're going to drag what's called a processor here onto the graph paper. And the processor I'm going to use is called query database table. Does what it says. It's going to query a database table. So I need to do some settings on this first. So right click and configure. And some of the properties we'll need. So we'll need to pick the connection pool. So we already created one. We'll choose that one. Database type, generic might work. I know MS SQL 2008 works and 2012 might work. So let's just go with those. I think this just relates to the actual SQL it's going to generate and not the driver itself. The table name, if I remember correctly, was ticket check. So it's going to query against this table. I'm not going to specify any columns, which means it's going to return all the columns, which is fine. And the maximum value column, this is kind of a cool feature. It'll check this column to see any new rows of data that have come in. So it's not going to pull every row of data every time. It's just going to check for the new rows of data. And it's going to use that column to figure out what it means by new. And so I have this game day column. This represents the time that the ticket is scanned at the ballpark, which is a perfectly good field to use for this, because once it's scanned, it's only going to be going in the future. More tickets will be past that date in time. And this processor will actually store the latest value of game day that is processed as part of its state. And I'll show you that in a second here. But I think that's all we need. Just need those fields there, table name, maximum. Yep, okay. So there we go. And what doesn't it like? Oh, because my my controller service is not enabled. I need to actually enable these. Just a little lightning bolt icon there, and enable this one. Yep, looks good. You can see the component that's actually hooked up to it. So it should be happy now. Okay, and it's not. There's no output yet, so it's not happy just yet. But that's fine. We'll come to that. Okay, and then we're going to drag another one on here. This is going to be the end state. And this is going to be also Couchbase. There's two options. We can get or put from Couchbase. I'm going to use the put. Put that in there. It doesn't like this, so I need to do some configuration here. Really only two things. We need to select the Couchbase cluster service we already created. Yep. The bucket name is was it tickets? Yep, tickets. All right. Document type JSON, that's fine. Document ID, we're just going to leave it blank for now. It's going to put a UUID in there, I believe, or GUID. You can also change the persist to and replicate to options. Remember, if you want to learn more about those, check out the playlist up there at the top. We talked about durability and replication, things like that already. So that's good. So it's just not happy because of the termination, which we'll get to. But actually, this is the end point of the flow. So at this point, we're going to terminate anything. This is going to be the end. So we could try to do some sort of retry, or if something fails, we'd want to do some additional stuff in NiFi. But I'm just going to say automatically terminate any of these things. So if we're successful, if there's a failure, if there's a retry, we're just going to terminate. This is going to be the end of the stream right here. Okay. Now it requires an upstream. It needs an input, but there isn't one. So we need to do that next. All right. So we're pulling data out of this table, and we need to put that data into Couchbase. But the problem is that the data being pulled out of this is in a format called what is it called? Avro. Avro is a data format that NiFi uses. It's also used by Hadoop and Spark and maybe some others. But Couchbase, Avro is kind of like JSON, but it has some extra data around it. Couchbase needs just JSON in it. So we need to go from Avro to JSON somehow. Not a problem. We need to create a new processor here. And we're going to call this one split Avro. Or we're going to find the split Avro one. Avro can be a large hunk of data. And if our table is getting a lot of data, then the Avro file could be a big batch of data. So I want to actually split that up just as a precaution, also as kind of a debugging helper there. So I've split Avro. It's going to convert Avro files into smaller Avro files, essentially. And to connect this up, all I do is highlight this. Notice that green arrow appears. I'm going to drag the arrow over here. And I'm going to say on success relationship. There's only one output of this, and it's success. And so it's going to create a little queue called success that goes between the querying and the actual split Avro there. So data from here is going to flow into a queue, and then Avro is going to pick it up from the queue, split it up, and then output it. Okay, so I've split up the Avro. The next thing I want to do is take the Avro and convert it to JSON. Convert Avro to JSON is one of the processors here. All right, and some settings in that is, okay, I don't want to have an array. I just want a single JSON document by itself. I don't want a object wrapped in an array. I just want a single object itself, so I'm setting that to none. And I think that's it. Okay, and so then I'll drag from here to here. And at this point, it says, okay, what do I want to actually send as this relationship? So from the split, I want the split output to go into the converter. Right? So it's going to, anything that splits up is going to go into this queue and out here. And then the other two outputs from this are original and failure. So if the splitting fails, it's going to go to this queue. It's going to take the original Avro data and pipe it to another queue. I don't really need those, so I'm just going to terminate those relationships right here at the split Avro. Okay? So right now we're pulling from SQL into Avro, splitting it up, and then converting from Avro to JSON. Okay? And so we take that JSON and we pipe it into Couchbase. And I only want to pipe in the successful ones to Couchbase, and we'll just terminate the failure ones. Now, this is kind of a happy path sort of thing. You probably want to actually account for any failures and retries in your NiFi logic. I haven't really gotten that far in my using of NiFi, so I'm just sticking to the happy path for now, and it seems to be working just fine. Okay. Now, moment of truth. Let's see if this actually works. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the query database table. Just push the start button there to get it going. So it's going to start to query that table for data and put it into this success queue. And one thing I want to note before I start this is that this UI in NiFi doesn't refresh immediately, so it might take a little bit of time for stuff to show up in this queue. Now, I haven't started anything else, so anything this table pulls in is going to be stuck in this queue until I let these processes go. So it's sort of like valves I'm turning off and on as the data flows. Okay, so let's actually put some data in the queue. It looks like Joey Votto is checking in. He's got a ticket to section 429, row C, seat 11, and then we're scanning him with the current date. And so if I select that from SQL Server, you'll see that there it shows up in the data. There's one row of data. And so Open Database Table is going to actually process that. Now, it's probably already done that, but the UI hasn't refreshed to show you what's in the queue yet. But what I can do is I can actually show you this state. So remember, we defined a column that's going to check to see the latest data. And so it's already found one, and it says, okay, here's the value. So anything with a value greater than this, I'm going to pull in. Anything with a value equal to or lesser than this, I'm going to ignore, because I've already processed it, is what it's assuming. Okay, so now it's actually showed up in the queue. We can actually go ahead and view the queue if you want to, and you'll see the Avro format here. So here's the one item in the queue, and I can view it. So this is the Avro sort of schema. It kind of looks like JSON, right? I can format it a little better so you can see what's going on there. So NiFi is pulling in the data, Joey Votto there. And so that's good. And I'll go ahead and just create one more. Matt Groves is also got a ticket, and he's sitting right next to Joey Votto. Wouldn't that be nice? So insert that. And so now there's 2 rows of data in there. Now notice that my timestamp is greater than Joey Votto's timestamp. So it's going to pull me in, but it's not going to pull in Joey Votto twice. So you can see already there, I've queued up 2 objects. All right. So now we're going to split them. Not that it really matters in this case because it's going to be 2 different Avro files. So splitting them is not going to really do anything. But if, for instance, there's a big batch of like 100 that were in one Avro file, we want to split those into 100 different items. So this split Avro is kind of optional. It really depends on your use case. Okay, so it's split it up. So it really hasn't done anything. It's just almost a no-op because it's already split into 2 pieces. Okay, so then we're going to turn this guy on here. This is going to convert those Avros into JSON. So again, it's probably already done it. We can look at the queue here. We can see these 2 items. View those a little bit, and it looks like it's just pure JSON now. None of that Avro stuff is in there before, so it looks very much the same except none of the Avro header stuff. All right, and now it's just sitting in NiFi waiting for me to put it into Couchbase. So we'll go ahead and start that up. And if we look at the tickets bucket, hopefully if I configured everything correctly, it'll show up here in Couchbase. It's not showing up yet, which means I probably screwed something up. So an error should hopefully, yep, here we go. There's an error. Timeout exception. Failed to process due to writing document. Standard flow. So what did I do wrong here? Properties. Bucket name tickets. Yeah, yeah. Okay, that looks good. Let's stop this. Is it still hanging out in the queue? Okay, it's good. Let's see. What did I do wrong? This is the risk I take when I blew away what was working so I could re-demonstrate it here on the stream. Connecting it all up. So let's look at those errors again. Timeout exception. Failed to process due to timeouts. So it's definitely here. I definitely have a Matt user that has admin permission. No, not Matt. Was I using Matt? I was using tickets, right? Go back over here. Oh, that's a problem. Yep. So notice I have bucket password for ticket, and it should be tickets. Okay. So in order to make that change, I have to disable this controller service. And then I can make the change. So I'll add bucket password for tickets with an S. And that password is password. And then I'll delete the wrong one, apply that, and just make sure that my user was in fact tickets. Yep. Okay, then I'll re-enable this controller service. All right, now we should work. Start this, put Couchbase key up again, and it should appear in here relatively instantaneously, which it did. There we go, Matt Groves and Joey Votto. So they made their way into the Couchbase cluster. So that's it. That's a really simple, fun, visual way to stream data from one place to another. You can do some processing on it. I've just scratched the surface of what NiFi can do. You can do all kinds of transformations and different processing and retrying, and I can set queue sizes and intervals and all this kind of great stuff. It's a very, very complete tool for doing this type of operation. So check it out, NiFi. I think it's Apache NiFi, or nifi.apache.org. They have a Docker image, which makes it super easy to get started, even on Windows. And experiment with it. They have some starter kits out there on NiFi for if you want to bring in from Twitter, for instance, instead of connecting to a database. You can bring in data from source like Twitter, which is what actually I first did. That's kind of like the hello world, I think, of NiFi. But there you go. So that's just, remember that little trick with the Couchbase. Don't forget that you have to have a user the same name as the bucket. at least until that NiFi connector gets updated. So that's it for now. We are at the 27-minute mark, so I'm going to call the end of the stream here. Just a reminder, if you have any questions or comments, please hit me up on Twitter or email there. Find old episodes on YouTube. And look for a blog coming soon on this exact topic, this NiFi topic, blog.couchbase.com. I'll do the full write-up there with all the details. And thank you very much for watching.